Today we'll go over how to set up Snowflake as a data warehouse, all the way from creating an account to users and role to ensuring you don't have any cost overruns. The first thing you do is you need to create an account. We will go to snowflake.com. You click Start for Free to start your free trial, add your information, and continue. Now you have a few decisions. Should you choose Standard, Enterprise, Business Critical, and where do you want your Snowflake instance to be hosted? To make the decision, we will start by going to Snowflake pricing. Here you can see you have Standard, Enterprise, Business Critical, and you can see there is some pretty big differences between the price. If you look at the features, you can go over, are there any features at any of the larger Business Critical Enterprise that you need? For the Starlight Data Warehouse template, we only need the standard, so we will choose the standard. Then you need to decide what platform, AWS, Azure, GCP, and where it should be located. If you are in Europe and your main provider is AWS, then just choose AWS. Let's say most of my assets is in Frankfurt. Choose Frankfurt. You can see there is some changes in prices. You go back, choose where you want to be, and choose Frankfurt. I will not create an account here because I already have an account. It is highly recommended to set up multi-factor authentication, and this is what I've set up for myself. So send a push, then you can see on my phone, I get a push notification, I approve, and I sign in. Let's go over the SnowSite interface. Where you'll spend most of your time is in worksheets. We will choose Project Worksheets, add a worksheet. Let's call this one Snowflake Setup. This is where you can write your SQL and run everything. Select one as ID, and then click Run, and then you can see the result. The next thing is databases. We don't have any databases except the one that comes with Snowflake, but if you want to create a database, it's just click Create Database, and then let's call it Test. And we can drop it again. The second thing is a really nice feature of Snowflake is the query history. So here you can see what we did. We did the select one, we did the create database, and we dropped the database. Then there is warehouses. This is the main compute unit of Snowflake. This is where you will incur most of your cost. You can create a warehouse. You can choose the size, create warehouse, and we can drop the warehouse again. Something that's highly recommended is cost management. Create resource monitors. Right now, I only have one account level resource monitor. You should create a resource monitor for each of your warehouses and one for the account level. Now for the architectural overview. The way the Starlight Data Warehouse template is built is you have two types of databases. You have analytical databases and you have data loader databases. The analytical database is where all your data assets lives. This is where all your DBT models are deployed. The main schemas here are one schema per developer, one schema per PR for the CI/CD, and one production schema. Then the data loader, the way you get data into Snowflake is usually through, that could be Fivetran or Airbyte or Meltano or S3 or any other data loader. And each of these data loaders should have its own database and one schema per source system. Let's say we have one database called Finance. This is the main data warehouse for finance. Then it has a schema. The production schema, I usually like to call it the data warehouse. Then the developers, each developer should have a schema. And then one schema for the PRs, the pull requests. The main reason why I give the name data warehouse is that it's Snowflake alphabetically orders it, so the production schema is always at the top. If you have multiple DBT projects, you should have multiple databases. So you can see we have one for finance, one for marketing, and also here for Fivetran and Airbyte. Warehouses. How many warehouses should you have? Should you just have one? Should you have multiple? As a rule of thumb, you should have as few warehouses as possible to optimize cost. However, the main reason why I split it up for one for development and one for each system is this is practically the only way that you can track spending and ensure that you don't have any of the systems that has some crazy cost overruns. So some systems, not the ones I'm showing here, but some systems are just insanely expensive. And then you can manage that and stop that. Resource manager, you should have one resource monitor for the entire account and one for each warehouse. Users and roles. In the Starlight Data Warehouse template, we have one role for developers, one role per system, and then one user per developer and one user per system. Multi-factor authentication and key pair. So every user that belongs to a person should have multi-factor authentication. This is like the most important thing in Snowflake. It is recommended for all system users where it is possible to use key pair instead of password. Unfortunately, many tools do not connect to Snowflake via key pairs, but if it's possible, then please use key pair. BI tools, there's no perfect way of managing permissions to BI tools. One way of doing it could be grant total permission to the data warehouse schema for the BI tools. This requires that the BI tool can manage permissions appropriately. Some BI tools are really good at managing permissions to the different users. Some are not so good. Another possible decision is to materialize all your dbt models as tables, except the ones that the BI tool should have access to. Those can be materialized as views. A third option, this is if you have multiple tools and you want to be really granular in what you're doing, is to use dbt grants, and you can read all about it here. Now let's start by setting up the account. The first thing you should do is to create a resource monitor for the account. We copy this, we add it in to our setup, and you can see what's happening here. I'm creating a resource manager and I'm altering account to set the resource manager to the account. I will not do it right now because I've already created this one. And if I do this, then it will just restart the quota, and I don't want that. I'll remove this one. Then we need to set the timeout. Snowflake has a very rare bug. I've been using Snowflake for, I think, 6 years now. If not daily, then weekly. And 2 times I've experienced a query that just kept running. It kept running until it would time out. Just something that should have taken a few seconds, it took until it timed out. On standard, this is the amount of seconds that is the timeout for Snowflake. That is 2 days. So this means that we actually paid for 48 hours of compute time. I recommended to set it just to 1 hour, or you can even set it to less, depending on your use case. But this is highly recommended to set this. We will run this, and you can see the value is 1 hour now, and it used to be 48 hours. We need to allow multi-factor authentication caching. This is something specific to dbt. The way dbt works is you're executing a lot of SQL script against Snowflake. If you don't set MFA caching, then Snowflake will ask for multi-factor authentication on every query. We will create a authentication policy. We will call it require MFA, and the policy is MFA enrollment is required. This authentication policy needs to be put in a database and in a database schema. So we will create a database called Snowflake policies and a schema called authentication policies. And then we will create this authentication policy. Good. Now to create developers. The first thing you will do is you will create a warehouse for all development. Then you will create a resource monitor. Then you will set the resource monitor to the developer. Then you will create a role for developers. Then you will grant the role to account admin. This is practically so you personally can use the role developer. Then you'll create a database. Then you'll grant create database to the role developers. And then you'll grant the usage of the warehouse developers to the role developer. Let's do this. First create the warehouse, then create the resource monitor, then attach the resource monitor to the developer, then create the role developer. Something where I see a lot of people get confused is that even though I created the developer, I am account admin, I still don't have access to use the developer. So you can see here, I don't have access to it. If I run, I don't have access to this one. The way to handle this is that you can either grant the developer to yourself, or you can grant this here to the role account admin. So if I run this one, then you can see that should be here. I will just refresh the page. Now you can see we have access to it. And you can see, since this is grayed out, it means that we don't directly have assigned this to ourselves, but we have inherited the role. And let's just run the other two. Good. Now to create the individual developers. You should first add a username, let's call it Martin1, email, and a long password. And then we will create the user. We will set it as a type person. We will say that they must change the password at the first time they log in. So you can give this password to the person and then they would have to change it. And again, you should not use this one. You should create your own. And down here, we will set the require MFA to that user. And then again, we will grant the role developer to this user. So if we do this, we have our first developer user. Again, you just change the variable here, and then you can create as many as you want. Now for the GitHub. GitHub action, this is something we will have a whole video about. This is the one that will handle all CI/CD, all deployment, all scheduling. Since this is a system, it will have its own user, its own role, its own warehouse, its own resource monitor. First, we will create a warehouse resource monitor, attach the resource monitor to the warehouse, create the role, grant the role to account admin, grant the usage of the warehouse to the role, create the user. And here's something interesting. GitHub fortunately allows to use a key pair. This is something we will create. I'll show you how. But first, let's create the warehouse, the resource monitor, attach the resource monitor, role, grant the role, grant the warehouse, create the user. And now, how do you use this? If we go in here, scroll all the way up, open this one, you can see here's a guide how to create public and private key. We will do it encrypted, so we need to create an encryption password. And let's just bang on the keyboard a lot of time. And then go back here, copy this, open the terminal, go to your desktop, execute the code, copy this, and now you can see we have created the public key. And you can see this here. Sorry, we have created the private key. To create the public key, you execute this, enter the password, and now the public key. This is what Snowflake needs. So you add this here, public key, and then you execute this. And this means from now on, you can log in with the private key and the encryption password. So you need to grant the role to the user GitHub. This is something that we will be using in the future. You should obviously not save the public key in GitHub. The reason why I did this is now you can see exactly how to add it. Create an analytical database. Let's call this one Starlight. The first thing we will do is to create the database. Then we will create the schema, data warehouse here. And then we will grant ownership to the database to the role developer. Then we will grant usage, create schema on the database to the role GitHub. And then we will grant ownership on the schema to the role, to the schema data warehouse to the role GitHub. For data loaders, again, we need to give the data loader a name. Let's say we want to add Fivetran. We need to add a warehouse, resource monitor, set the warehouse to the resource monitor, add a database, create the role, create the user. And you can see this one is set to type service, add the public key. And not all systems will accept a private key or public private key. So if you have a system that doesn't accept this, then you have to remove this one. And then grant the role to the user, grant the role to GitHub, grant the role to developer, grant the ownership of the database to the data loader role. This may be something you don't want. I would recommend that you refer to the documentation of the data loader, and then grant usage of the warehouse to the data loader. Let's run this. Again, you should always refer to the documentation. For example, Fivetran needs this set. So since it's a Fivetran, we need to set this one. And run. Good. BI tools. Here, again, I would recommend that you refer to the documentation, but let's say we want to set Power BI. I don't think Power BI accepts a key pair, so we need to use a password. We create a warehouse, we create a resource monitor, we attach the resource monitor, we add the role, we create the roles, we create the user, we grant the role to the user, we grant the role to developer, and we grant users on the warehouse. Let's do that. And that's actually how you set everything up. So let's go over what we've done. The first thing is databases. We created this database here and this database here. You can see the owner is Fivetran. The owner here is developer. GitHub can create schemas and have usage of the database. The data warehouse schema is the owner is GitHub. And if we look at warehouses, you can see we created a whole lot of warehouses here. Cost management, resource monitors. We created a whole lot of resource monitors. And if you want to see users and roles, we created a whole lot of users and we created a whole lot of roles. If you want to get a graphical overview over your roles, you can see developer, the role developer we have given Fivetran and Power BI to that one. GitHub, we've only given for now Fivetran to this one. Everything rolls up to account admin. So this is how you set up a data warehouse in Snowflake. I hope you enjoyed this. This is part of a playlist. If you go to the comment section or the description, you can see the entire playlist on how to set up a full data warehouse, a full data platform on Snowflake with dbt, GitHub Action, and all of that. Thank you.